Okay, everybody, you are very welcome to this morning's event, Is EU Funding for Me? So my name is Emily Nelson. I'm the European Programs Manager at The Wheel, and my colleague Christina and I will be your facilitators this morning. So before we dive in, I'm just going to go through some quick Zoom housekeeping. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to ask for the standard Zoom consideration of keeping yourself muted when appropriate to avoid background noise. You'll note that we are recording today's session. So if you don't want to appear in said recording, feel free to keep your camera switched off. Christina and I are jointly providing tech support today. So if you have any Zoom issues, send one of us a message in the chat and we'll do our best to sort you out. You can also feel free to use the chat to say hello and where you're joining us from today. In terms of follow-up, you will receive the recording, the slides, and other resources in an email that we will send out later this week. So that's it on the housekeeping, and I'm going to walk you through the agenda and what you can expect today. So we are going to start off with a quick poll just to get the lay of the land and see what kind of EU funding experience people in the room have. Then we're going to go through the basics. So what is EU funding? Then we're going to look at the practicalities. So how does EU funding work? What are the characteristics of EU funding? And then we'll have a look at some of the opportunities. So we're going to look at a few of kind of the more accessible entry-level EU programs. Then we're going to hear from Paul from Respond. He's going to kind of talk us through Respond's EU funding journey. So we'll put some of this information into context for you. And then we'll have a Q&A session. So if you do have questions throughout this morning's session, feel free to pop them into the chat. And once we get to the Q&A session, we can address them there. After the Q&A, we will go through an action plan. So looking at some very practical steps to starting your own EU funding journey. And we will wrap it up with some supports to get you on your way. So just to manage your expectations for today, you're most likely not going to come away from today an EU funding expert, unless I've really undersold the session. But hopefully what you will come away with is an understanding of what EU funding is and the opportunities and challenges it presents, the available supports to access it, and kind of a better sense of whether or not it's something that you'd like to pursue for your organization. So that's the hope. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to kick things off by doing a short 2-question poll using Menti. So you can access the poll by scanning this QR code here, or going to menti.com and entering the code 2381333. And I think Christina will also pop that link in the chat so you can access it. So the poll has 2 questions. The first one is, have you been involved in EU-funded projects before? And you have 3 options for an answer. So yes, a few, so 1 or 2 projects. Yes, a lot, 3 or more projects, or not yet. And then the second question is open-ended. So what are you hoping to learn today? So hopefully we will be covering most of what your expectations are, but if not, your answers are going to let us know what further information and resources we can signpost you to in the follow-up email. And it'll also help us to figure out what to cover in future trainings. So hopefully you can access that. And I'm going to go ahead and share some of the results as they come in. Okay. Okay, so slowly but surely we're getting some results in. So 2 people, not yet. 4. Good, you're in the right place. And then 1 person who's been involved in a few projects. Okay, great. So it looks like, yeah, the majority of people haven't been involved in EU-funded projects yet, and a few people have been involved in 1 or 2 projects. So good. Hopefully we'll give you some food for thought, some inspiration to get started on your own EU-funded journey today. And you might be able to do a bit of networking with people in the room that have been involved in projects before. So Next question. Wow, lots of responses. What are you hoping to learn today? What can be funded? How to access it? How to get started? Best practice? Where to find info? New opportunities? Great. So it looks like we will be covering most of this stuff. And again, as I mentioned, if there are very specific things that we don't cover today, you can always reach out to us directly and we can signpost you to the appropriate, more in-depth information. Okay, so thank you so much for participating in that poll. That's super helpful for us. So just bear with me a moment and we'll get started on the next part. Okay, so the basics. What is EU funding? So we're going to look at what EU funding is and how it works. I'm not going to go into exhaustive detail here because it's unnecessary and you don't really need to know a great deal about how EU policy works in order to access EU funding, but it is good to have a general overview of the process and how it relates to all the funding opportunities. And it can help you also to sort of navigate this process a little bit easier and connect the dots that will allow you to make stronger and more successful applications when you get to that point. All right. So jumping right in with the Multi-Annual Financial Framework, or MFF. So you often hear this spoken about in terms of EU funding. And basically, it's the EU's long-term budget. So the MFF runs according to 7-year cycles, and it's where the EU determines what their goals are over the 7-year period and how they're going to allocate funding to achieve these goals. So right now we are in the 2021 to 2027 cycle. So we're kind of just over halfway through this MFF. And there were a lot of delays in releasing some of the EU funding programs in the first few years. But by now, all of these programs have been released. So it's a great time to start getting to grips with EU funding and explore all the opportunities that are out there. Excuse me. So in this 7-year cycle, not only do we have a bigger than ever MFF budget-wise, but we also have 3 additional budget lines made available to member states. So that's the Next Generation EU and Recovery and Resilience Facility, and those can mainly support COVID-19 recovery. And then there's also a €5 billion Brexit Adjustment Reserve. And if you want to read more about that, it's hyperlinked in the slides, which we'll share with you. And so you can see here what that looks like in terms of how much those additional budget lines supplement the standard MFF. So there's over €2 trillion for this budget for EU funding programs. So when you see these numbers, it can look like there is an endless amount of money, but just to keep it in perspective, a huge portion of this is absorbed by member state governments and by large-scale projects like infrastructure projects and policy reform. That said, in the current MFF, the EU are really pushing for a lot more citizen and civil society involvement in EU projects. It's a core component of them. And we'll, for our part, have been campaigning hard that in as much as possible, that portions of these budgets are ring-fenced for the civil society sector and that the sector is supported to better access EU funding through training and events like this. Okay, so how do those massive budgets actually become funding opportunities that trickle down to us? So it starts with policy, so like the EU Green Deal, for example. And policy then leads to the creation of funding programs, and those funding programs are divided thematically. So there are EU funding programs for education, EU funding programs for environment, and for things like interregional cohesion. So EU funding programs are often sometimes called financial instruments because they're the instruments that deliver on policy. So each of these funding programs then has an annual program guide. And those program guides or work programs are produced at the start of each funding program and then updated regularly through those work programs. So the work programs for the funding programs set priorities, conditions, and timetables. And this allows the overall funding program to be flexible and respond to current events and issues like COVID or the war in Ukraine. So then these funding programs, they fund projects which do the work that actually furthers the policy priorities. So when you are creating a project application, you should always link your project to EU policy. And our Access Europe website, which we'll talk about in depth later, has an interactive guide to 10 key policies for the 2021 to 2027 period. And that should be a big help to you if you do decide to submit a funding application. So ideally, then your project helps further policy directives from the EU and can ultimately also help to inform policy nationally here in Ireland. That's the goal. Okay, so let's say that you see a program that looks relevant to your work. What can you expect from EU funding? What does it look like in practice? So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Christina now, who's going to take us through the characteristics of EU funding.
Okay, thank you, Emily. I will do that in 1 second. Happy to see so many of you here today. Let me just share my screen and then we go to the practicalities of EU funding. So I will focus on some key characteristics. Again, this is a very broad overview. It is intended to give you an idea of what you can and cannot expect from EU funding. So you can actually take the decision, is EU funding for me or not? What the title suggested as well. So there are obvious benefits to EU funding. It offers significant opportunities for civil society organizations for our sector. And apart from the financial support, securing financial resources, which is of course one of the great opportunities, it is also an opportunity to learn and share. So you can learn from others, but you can also share your own expertise, your own knowledge, best practices with a group of relevant stakeholders, international partners. It is a great tool, and we heard that from Emily before, to connect with and influence policy. So you can become involved in policy discussions, advocacy networks, dialogues that influence EU policies, and that on issues that you work with. They might be human rights, environmental protection, social welfare, health, or something. So this can be interesting for you and your working area. Then it is an opportunity to be innovative. So you can design and implement projects focused on issues you may not otherwise have the resources to address. You can try out, you can test, and you can prototype. It gives you an opportunity to do exactly this. And this can also benefit you to fast-track strategic objectives of your organization. It is always a great opportunity to collaborate with partners, as EU funding frequently requires you to collaborate with organizations across different EU countries. So you can foster new partnerships, networks, and cross-border collaboration. It is an excellent opportunity also to build your capacity. Those EU-funded projects often include capacity building components, and this can help your organization to develop expertise in, may it be project management, financial reporting, monitoring, or evaluation. Some programs even provide training for your staff. So this can empower your staff with new skills. And this, again, are various fields. This runs from advocacy, digital transformation to sustainability and so forth. And one other aspect is interesting. It can also build your organizational profile. Your projects often attract public and media attention. This can, on the one hand, raise the visibility of your organization and help you attract additional funding, for example, in the future. But also, EU funding serves as a seal of approval for organizations. So this can enhance your whole reputation, your credibility, and make it, again, easier to gain future funding, supports, like attention from government, etc. So what you're aiming for, basically. Two other points is that EU funding is also an opportunity to encourage sustainability, because many projects are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So you can contribute to global sustainability targets, and you can raise awareness of environmental issues. And one maybe also interesting point is that you have an opportunity here to drive digital transformation, as many EU funds support digital innovation, digital skills. This gives you an opportunity to adopt new technologies to, for example, improve your digital infrastructure or enhance digital skills among your staff or your target groups, your clients. Now, after the benefits, let's look at what it is. What are the facts? It is usually project-oriented. So it is allocated for specific projects with clear goals, clear outcomes, and timelines. And as also Emily mentioned, it emphasizes projects that align with EU policy priorities. So you should have them straight. Projects revolve around innovation, are focused on those innovative initiatives. So they are not focused on funding existing work. And I will come back to that later. This is also a very important point. They also thematically focused. So funding priorities often center around themes, as was mentioned before, social inclusion, human rights, sustainability, innovation, just to name a few. They are results oriented. So it requires projects to be designed with measurable objectives. So for example, outcomes must be demonstrated through monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. So already in the project design and writing phase, you will have to demonstrate very clearly how you will measure the results. And in the reporting phase on a completed project, you will need to illustrate how you reached your objectives. Again, with clear evidence. EU funding or EU projects are always or often partnership based. So they require partnership between organizations across different EU member states. And the goal, of course, here is to foster cross-border collaboration. These can be bigger consortia with 8 to 10 or even more partners, but there are also smaller consortia with, say, let's say 2 organizations. That really depends on the program and the call. There are a few exceptions for those partnership models, but then again, this is only a few, this is EU funding. So there's like the clear goal to foster this cross-border collaboration. So there will always be a part in it. It is funding the right activities, and this might be of interest to you. And I will just list a few of those activities that can be funded with EU funding. It can be knowledge exchange and transfer. It can be events, conferences. It can be mobilities, so like study placements and visits. It can be very concrete capacity building, training, workshops, but it can also be intellectual outputs. Let's say a toolkit, a best practice guide, a course, a report. It also funds new technologies, methodologies, or approaches, even the building of networks, so for professionals or for other target groups. As I mentioned before, it's open to both large and small organizations. While larger organizations may find it easier to access funding, the EU also offers funding schemes specifically tailored for small organizations, and I will come to this later on again. And then the last point is, in some cases, it is multi-year funding. So programs offer grants that can extend over multiple years and provide sustained support for longer-term projects, again, only in some cases. So this all sounds very nice. However, as good as all this sounds, let's look at it, at what it isn't. And you should be aware of those. It is definitely not quick, immediate funding. There is a lengthy application process, a lengthy selection and contracting process. So EU funding often takes time before you actually receive those funds. Yeah, you need to calculate maybe a year from the start of the application process until actually those funds are dispersed. It is definitely not easy. So the application process and project management, the reporting requirements are huge and leave little flexibility. So rigorous monitoring, evaluation to ensure compliance and impact is expected from you. And also this leaves little room for deviation from approved plans. You should be aware of that. That this probably also will require resources on your end that you have to put in. It is definitely not without risk. So funding is not guaranteed, and that is even for well-established organizations. So EU grants are competitive, and that means that only a portion of applicants receive funding. Keep in mind, you are usually competing with thousands of organizations across Europe, and Emily mentioned it before, those budgets may seem huge, but it's spread across the whole continent in most cases. Then again, oh yeah, co-funding, very important point. I said it before, it's project oriented. So the clear majority of funds are to fund projects, and they will not cover core costs. That means it is not provided for basic organizational operations, such as salaries or administrative costs, if they are not related to a specific project. What I want to say with this, it will not generally keep the lights on or the doors open. So, and another important point regarding the financing, the funding that you actually receive, is that it usually also requires a co-financing. You maybe have heard that, matched funding. So you need to secure additional funding from other sources to cover the total project costs. And those rates vary. It depends on the program and on the goal. So they can be bigger or smaller, and also what is co-financing, what counts as co-financing. But this is then depending on the call and the program. And again, just to highlight this once more, it's definitely not national funding. So it is partnership-based. Purely local projects may struggle to receive funding. Again, there are some exceptions, but it is the goal is to enhance and to foster cross-border collaboration. So after all this, hearing this, you should ask yourself, are you willing to work transnational and build up European partnerships and networks, to work project-based and drive innovation, to build capacity by learning and sharing knowledge with others, and while on the other hand, accepting all the criteria that I just mentioned? It's not quick, easy, it's not core funding, not national funding. So if you say yes, then EU funding, congratulations, might be for you and your organization. So what I will tell you now about is some of the opportunities that come with EU funding, because now the next step would be how to find the right funding program and open call that would suit your organization and the area you're working in. So and we're happy to help you with that, to give you a quick overview. As mentioned before, again, EU funding programs and calls are divided thematically. You should check out the programs that are out there. There are a lot. On our website, you'll find a short description and more information about the most relevant programs, and especially those for civil society organizations. Again, Access Europe is here for you. You can contact us, you can send us an email, and we can find the right program and call for your project. I would today just shortly present 3 programs for newcomers, and I marked them here in red. It's Erasmus+, it's the European Solidarity Corps, and SERVE, the Citizens' Equality, Rights and Values Program. Those funding programs are, in general, well suited for civil society organizations at an entry level, because they offer simplified application processes, they have manageable funding requirements and smaller grant sizes. So you can start here and you will gain valuable experience managing your funded projects, and then you develop step-by-step a capacity for larger, more complex projects in the future. If you would like to know more about also all the other EU funding programs, you're very welcome to check our YouTube channel. We did an in-depth training on EU funding programs covering all the programs that are relevant for civil society organizations. You'll find the recording on our YouTube channel, and we will also share the link later on. So let's start. I will present on 3 programs, as I said, and I would start with Erasmus+, probably the most well-known among yourselves. It is the EU program for education, training, youth, and sport. It supports personal, educational, professional development in those set areas. It offers smaller grants, which is ideal for smaller organizations. And also why it is a good entry level is that the application process is accessible. It has a focus on building partnerships, on building intercultural exchange, community-based projects. It provides introduction to EU funding with lower administrative burdens for smaller projects. So that's why we would like to give you an opportunity to learn more about this program. Erasmus+ offers mobility projects and cooperation partnerships and small-scale partnerships in those areas you see here: higher education, vocational education and training, school education, adult education, youth, and sport. As I said, there are 2 types of projects. The first one is mobility projects, where you can send your staff, volunteers, maybe young people, to travel to another country to work, train, learn, or job shadow. And there are those cooperation partnerships and small-scale partnerships. And these fund projects between organizations. So you would have a consortium from partners from different countries, and you together develop, transfer, implement innovative tools and practices. You can learn about this in depth on some links that I will share afterwards. This is just to give you an overview. And just to mention, two things about the sectors that I have here. Vocational education and training includes training for your staff and for practitioners within our sector. And I will share an example in a minute where we did exactly that. And around education is also an important point, that you may not consider yourself an adult education organization, but you don't have to identify as such. So for example, if you work with people experiencing homelessness and you want to develop a course of soft skills or pathways to independence, you could apply for something like that. Or if you work with carers or older people and you want to develop a course or educational resource or technology that would help educate about, say, healthy lifestyle or lifelong learning, you could do that with this funding. So as long as the main goal of the project is to educate, and as long as it is aligned with the program's objectives, this is available to you. So just to give you an opportunity or like an insight in what Erasmus Plus could cover. I will show you one example. And this is an example from the wheel. So we also running Erasmus Plus projects. And here we were a partner in the SCOPE project with a focus on building capacity for the third sector. This would fall under VET, under the vocational education and training strand. It began in 2018 and it aimed to address the need for free, high quality educational resources and recognition of sector skills, of third sector skills. So we partnered with Ahearne here in Ireland. We had partners from Scotland, Finland, Latvia, and Estonia. And in the frame of this consortium of this project, we developed an online platform. So this was kind of our outcome. We had developed the learning content for the online platform and then a validation system. So every partner has this part and could bring in their experiences into this project. And we created models on the basics of governance, fundraising, financial management, communications, and risk management. The total grant you see here was split up between the partners. Everyone had his work package and everyone they contributed to this project outcome. This is just one example. If you want to know more, we collected some important links here. First of all, LEAGES is the national contact point here in Ireland, and they provide expert knowledge, excellent support, great also events on all things around Erasmus+. You will also find impact stories on their website to learn about projects that were actually funded here in Ireland. If you want to know more about the program itself, you can check out the Commission website, the program guide, or also the application portal. Excuse me. I'm just drinking something. So let's move on to the second program that can be a very good starting point. And these are European Solidarity Corps. This program brings together young people and organizations, and the goal is to build a more inclusive society, to support vulnerable people, and to respond to societal and humanitarian challenges. And this might be interesting. It provides national and international opportunities. The objectives here are to empower young people to participate in the world, to build an inclusive and democratic Europe, to promote sustainability development through projects at grassroots level. The target group are usually young people aged 18 to 30. And projects are funded under two strands. One is a volunteering project and the other one is a solidarity project. Volunteering projects are those where young people are sent by one organization to volunteer in another European country and to exchange ideas, to learn, connect, and grow. So here funding is available for different kinds of projects, but it's always including this volunteering aspects. People are sent to another country. And then there are the solidarity projects. And this is organized by a group of young people at national or international level. Again, you find more information about this on the link that I provide here on the slide. You can find some types of projects. It has a clear target group, so it's a little bit more limited, but again, it's a very, very good starting point with smaller grants and administrative regulations. To give you an example project, Glucksmann, in partnership with UCC, did this project Out in Action. It was a 12-month project, and the target group were children in a direct provision accommodation center. This project enabled the children to have positive creative experiences and learn art making skills. You can find more information about it on their website. And also just to give you here some more links, Leagas again manages the European Solidarity Corps, so reach out to them for more info and support, check their website. We are reaching now the third option. Let's look at that. This is the Citizens Equality Rights and Values Program, called SERV in short. And it is the EU's funding program for citizens' engagement and the implementation of EU rights and values. Let's have a closer look what it was designed to. It was designed to support a range of organizations with different levels of experience. Again, that's why this is interesting for the entry level, particularly those organizations focused on fundamental rights, democracy, and equality. This program has simplified application structures and procedures for smaller grants and for funding for small-scale local projects even. So SERV is especially accessible for newer or smaller organizations. And again, this can act as a stepping stone for you to gain experience with EU funding processes. SERV aims to protect and promote union rights and values, to promote non-discrimination, equality, including gender equality. It aims to promote citizens' engagement and participation in the democratic life and exchanges between citizens of different member states. I just drink once more a little bit of water. Just, excuse me, I had a cold recently and I didn't get my voice back. So if I'm cracking up a little bit with my voice, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so these are in general the SERV aims and objectives. And again, maybe it's interesting for you what kind of activities it might be funding. So it includes activities like training, workshops, conferences, mutual learning and cooperation, capacity building, town twinning, and also media campaigns, awareness raising campaigns, and dissemination activities. To give you also an example here, this is a project by UNICEF. It's called Children as Champions of Change. It ran from March 2021 to February 2023. UNICEF were the project lead, UNICEF Ireland, and they were implementing activities in the areas of child rights awareness raising, child rights schools, and child participation in public spheres. Again, if you want to know more about that, we will share some links about it, just to give you an idea what it all can be, such as SERV project. What is important to know, SERV calls will be published soon. It is actually set in November, so there's not so much left of the month. So we expect them to be published very soon. You can watch out if you sign up to our newsletter. We will tell you about it, and also on our website you will find all open calls. If you want to know more, you can click about the program. You can click on the links that I compiled here. What I really would recommend is to sign up to this SERV Citizens Forum. This is actually a network of the national contact points in Europe for the SERV program, and they created this forum. So you can sign up, and then you will always receive directly in your inbox emails with news about events or open calls, and they have a dedicated project partner search where you even can upload your organizational profile or say, okay, I would like to go for this call. I have this project idea already fleshed out and I'm looking for partners. So this partner search I can highly recommend. Just to mention, SERV as a program don't have a national contact point in Ireland so far. So if you have questions about the program, reach out to us, to Access Europe. We're very happy to help you with answering your questions. Yeah, so that's from my side. I hope it gave you a little bit of what EU funding is, what it is not, what to expect, and maybe also gave you an idea where to start and to look first to make your project idea a reality. Thank you, and I would stop sharing now and hand over to Paul for the case study.
Thanks, Christina. Morning, everybody. So yeah, my name is Paul Ahearne. I'm the partnerships lead with Respond. Some of you may know Respond. We're, I suppose, first and foremost, we're an approved housing body providing social housing across the 26 counties of Ireland. But relevant to this conversation, What people don't know about us is that we provide a range of community-based services supporting families and individuals on a whole range of different areas. And the one that's relevant to today is our family homeless services. We have 6 family homeless services across the country. Last year, we supported over 130 families across those 6 countries, and it's for that area of work that we sought the support of Erasmus, and that I'll be chatting a little bit now about. So I don't have any slides to share, so hopefully you don't get too bored listening to me talking about it. But we first came across the EU funding at the Access Europe event in the RDS roughly around this time last year, actually. And it sort of sparked something with us that, listen, maybe there's opportunities here that would support the work that we're doing on the ground. When we came back after the event at the RDS, we held a workshop meeting with our colleagues who are frontline staff members, informed them about the opportunities with EU funding. And straight away, I suppose there was a knowledge gap identified whereby our homeless services team, who are working directly with obviously families who are in crisis, they identified a need where really we didn't have the skills to support those tenants with a return to education and then ultimately a return to work, which really is the opportunities that they needed to, I suppose, transform their lives, get back on their feet and starting to live independently again. Having been informed then by the homeless services team that this was the gap that they'd identified, we brought it to senior management to say, listen, this is, this issue has been flagged with us. What we would like to do is apply for EU funding. It was a new departure for us, so hence we sought the approval from the senior management team on it. They absolutely saw the value in doing it, not just in terms of this particular need, which is the upskilling of our staff to support families, but I suppose it's opening up opportunities for what will hopefully become, many years of engagement with Lurgus, Erasmus, the Wheel, and so on in terms of accessing EU funding for different projects over the next few years. Our homeless services team, I suppose, what we wanted to support the tenants who we worked with. As a result, I suppose the experiences our tenants have being homeless, the difficulty, the stress and the difficulties that brings on them, and many of the parents and the families suffered with very low self-esteem, their confidence had been knocked. So it wasn't just, I suppose, our frontline staff, they identified it wasn't just that they needed to be able to support people with accessing education, but they also needed to be trained as to how to empower and provide life skills to these people as well, to help them gain the confidence that will allow them to go forward with the education and then the future work opportunities that may come their way. I suppose we looked then at what opportunities existed in Ireland, and while there was, there's a lot of very generic sort of training in this area, there was nothing specific to working with people who are experiencing homelessness. So again, through the supports that are there, Gemma at Lurgus, Emily at the Wheel, and so on, we spoke to a number of different people just to sort of get a steer from them. Again, bearing in mind it was our first time to look at this, and it was clearly identified that the KA 122 was the best option for us to go at. We set ourselves up then on the ePale platform, which is designed as, I suppose, it's a support platform to help organisations with that whole networking piece and identify suitable partners across Europe to help them with their own ambitions. Through that, we identified, through the ePale platform, we identified the Ballymun Job Centre, which thankfully were just down the road from us. We're based in Drumcondra. They had experience in this area themselves, and through their own experience, they actually suggested an organisation who are based in Spain. I'm not going to try the Spanish pronunciation, but it's the Consultancy of Social Innovation. It's the Anglicized version of the organization's name. They're actually based in Malaga in Spain, and came highly recommended to us by Ballymun. So again, through ePale, the ePale platform, we reached out to CIS and got speaking with an amazing woman there, Angela, who again, I suppose, gave us that supporting hand to guide us through the process. And from there, then we identified that, yeah, listen, this is a real opportunity for us. Our staff are going to benefit immensely from this, but ultimately the tenants who we work with. So I suppose bringing things forward to September just gone, 11 members of our family homeless services team travelled over to Malacca. They participated in a week-long course on symbol work and life design methodologies, items such as islands of emotion, the magic circle, and releasing anchors being a number of the programs that they looked at. The training was, I suppose, key area of focus was self-reflective conversations with tenants, so that when they came back with their training, they could sit down with tenants, have those conversations with them, get the tenants to, I suppose, identify themselves what they need to do, and then we support them in reaching and achieving their goals. So I suppose the staff, when they went over, if I'm honest, a couple of them within the first half day of the training, they thought, "Oh my God, is this going to be an absolute waste of time?" I think they were possibly a little bit overwhelmed with the whole thing. But at the end of first day, they absolutely were bought in. They felt that this was already, that identified by the end of day one, that this was something pretty special. It was going to add massive value to the work that they do with our tenants, and they fully embraced and enjoyed the entire experience. So our staff are now working on means. So now that they're back, they're now working on means of introducing the learning to their daily work, and have already started to see benefits in our work with our tenants. Some of the key feedback we got from the 11 learners who travelled over is that, because I suppose our family home services are spread across 6 different services across the country, it represented a fantastic opportunity for them to meet and collaborate on a shared project, and something that we weren't really able to facilitate ourselves up until this point. So it really presented a fabulous opportunity in that regard. The other thing that we made sure to do was, across each of the 6 homeless services, we had a minimum of one person representing that service. So, and ultimately what that means now is that we have a champion of the learning initiative in each service, and they then can share that knowledge with their colleagues on the ground in the service that they're working in. And ultimately we want to do through one of our in-house town hall meetings is for the 11 learners to come together and share their learnings with the broader organisation, so people have a greater understanding of the work that they're doing with the tenants and the value that that's adding to their work. And I suppose just 2 things that were particularly striking to us as we were going through the process. 2 of the learners who went over were actually former service users of Respond, 2 young ladies who due to various circumstances, ended up homeless themselves. And they went over. They're now working with Respond. They're incredible people who've really, they've turned their lives around immensely over the last number of years. They actually travelled over. I suppose it was an amazing opportunity for them to learn further, to strengthen their skills in the new area of work that they're in. For one of the ladies in particular, she'd never been outside of Ireland, so that whole cultural experience was aside from the academic learning piece of it, the cultural experience was a massive bonus to her, and really fed her confidence and brought her confidence levels to a whole new level. And just, I suppose, to finish up, there's a couple of quotes from a couple of the people who did travel over. So I'm just going to take a sip of water here. Excuse me. So just the First Lady, quote from her is, "Sharing our experiences over dinner was particularly meaningful. During this time, we had productive conversations about what we thought of each day. How would this translate back to our work when we got home, and how would we share this with our team?" So again, I suppose the relevance of that is, whilst they were doing the 6 hours intensive training during the day, they were going out as a group for meals that night, and they actually all brought journals with them. So whilst they were out for, I suppose, a bit of breather from the learning and to enjoy the local cultures and so on through discussions over a meal and that sort of relaxed atmosphere. They were further able to capture their learnings and share their thoughts and views on it amongst one another. And then the last quote here is actually from one of the ladies who we supported when she was homeless. And she said that I was very proud of myself as coming from homelessness myself, and now here in Spain, having completed the training and receiving the certificate, I now feel I'm putting into practice in the organisation I once resided with, and I feel amazing. Sorry, 1 second. So I suppose for that lady, it's again, the learning is one piece of it, but in terms of her, the impact for her as an individual and her confidence levels and so on, it's been invaluable. So that's it for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Paul. I'm just going to remove the spotlight from you there. So yeah, I think that you did a really great job of touching on so many different kind of elements of EU funding and how it can benefit your organization and build capacity for your staff and just kind of serve as sort of a sustainable resource, like ongoing for your organization as well. And it's really great to hear that you first found out about, or kind of what kind of twigged you to get started on EU funding was going to our Access Europe showcase. We'll talk a little bit more about that later because that's actually happening again next week. So we would invite you all to come and learn more about EU funding there in person. And I also love that you mentioned that you kind of reached out to your colleagues in the sector. So you found out through that ePally platform that the Ballymun Job Centre were involved in EU funded projects. So that's a great way to kind of build your own networks, both internally and abroad, is just kind of by reaching out in that whole kind of peer exchange bit. Because I think that organizations that are involved in EU funded projects are just so happy to kind of share their learning and get you kind of started on that journey. So thank you for that, Paul.
And I think actually, Emily, just one thing as well, I suppose for anyone going down this route, one of the big tips I would suggest, and we were chatting about this before that we started here, is not to be afraid to reach out to the likes of yourself or Gemma at Lurgus or Mark, who coordinates the ePally platform. That they are there to help. Certainly, it made our life a lot easier as we were going through the process. So I think Irish people by nature always feel they're going to be in a hindrance when they're asking people for help, but certainly don't feel that because we probably couldn't have got through it as well as we did without that support.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Paul. So what we're going to do now is just open the floor up for questions. So if anybody has any general questions about EU funding for myself or Christina, or any maybe specific questions for Paul about his experience with Erasmus Plus and EU funding, you can feel free to come on mic and ask. I'm just going to check the chat and see if there's anything there.
Hi, Emily.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Sridevi here. I just put my question on the chat, and you have replied back to that non-EU project collaboration is possible. So do we have an idea what exact criteria would that be in case if it's possible to apply?
Yeah, so the question is if non-EU organizations can participate in EU funded projects, is that right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Yeah, so that is possible for some funding programs. So there is the EU's program for research and innovation is called Horizon Europe. So it's definitely possible to partner on projects. It's possible for organizations that are not based in the EU to partner on projects for Horizon Europe. For programs like Erasmus Plus, it is possible as well. There are different kind of larger scale Erasmus Plus projects that aren't managed here in Ireland by Lurgus, that are managed directly by the Commission. Those are kind of larger capacity building projects. And organizations outside of the EU can take part in those. So if you're interested in that, I can send you on more information on those kinds of projects.
Yeah,
generally,
please, Emily, yeah.
Yeah, generally the sort of projects and programs that we support people with through Access Europe are kind of EU member state based. But there is an opportunity out there, so I can send you on more information directly about that kind of stuff.
Will that be possible to have the project remotely in that case? So the primary organization can be here in Ireland, and the one who are partnering, they can be in non-EU. So will that happen remote or in person, or how that it works? Can we manage to put it in the remote project?
Yeah, there's just I don't know that there's usually an option to go fully remote because there is so much emphasis on the transnational partnership and the cultural exchange. So usually like a lot of the budget that you would get for the project is to fund transnational meetings where you go to the partner organizations town and meet with
Okay.
them in person. So you know, obviously there's a big emphasis on kind of like sustainability and digital transformation in the projects, but they still do want to kind of foster that in-person collaboration and sort of organic exchange. So I don't know that it's possible to go fully remote on a project. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, thanks, Emily.
You're welcome.
Emily, I'm monitoring the chat a little bit. I can give you the next question.
Mhm.
What are the most common mistakes made in applications?
Ooh, that's a big
Yeah.
question. I think so. This is another opportunity to point out that we have a whole series of trainings on our YouTube channel, and one of them is about how to write a successful EU project application. So we can link that as well. And that obviously goes way more into depth on common mistakes made in applications. But I think one of the big ones is probably not linking your project to EU policy. So oftentimes people forget that, you know, EU funding in these projects, there has to be an added value to the EU. So you can't just kind of be talking about how it's going to benefit the partners individually or Ireland. It has to be kind of linked to overall EU policy and advancing that. So making sure that you're constantly kind of referring back to the policies that the program overall is trying to advance. And making sure, like, there's so many kind of questions in EU funding applications, it oftentimes feels like they're kind of asking the same questions in different ways. So using kind of the keyword approach and making sure that you are responding to exactly what they are asking you and that all of your KPIs are actually achievable and measurable. Sometimes, you know, if you work with a consultant, they might put in kind of KPIs or goals that aren't actually achievable for you. So where it's possible, we always sort of recommend that organizations write these applications themselves, just so they can make sure that what they're saying that they can deliver on is actually achievable. So I think those are some of the common mistakes, is just making sure that you can actually deliver on what you're going to what you're promising in your application, making sure that it aligns with your strategic goals, but that overall it advances EU policy and has added value for all the partners and the EU's policy kind of objectives overall. And again, we go into depth more on that topic in our writing an application training, so we can link that as well.
Okay, so I have two questions here on partnership building, and I can take those. So one is, what is the best way to get in touch with other possible partners? What are the best ways to find partners? I know about IPALE, but how would you go about finding EU partners? And so there are multiple opportunities. First of all, we did also an in-depth training on that. You find that also on the YouTube channel. I'm happy to share that in the follow-up email, because there are like a lot of steps you can actually take. Yeah, IPALE, like for single programs, they usually have these project partner search databases. So I mentioned that for SURF, but that is also true for other programs. So there's an opportunity to find partners and to say, I would like to go for this call, and I look for ideas or for potential partners. However, we also give in this partnership building, consortia building training, more tips. So it's all about you also reaching out to your European networks, for example, or to do some research on other organizations that are relevant around Europe in your working areas, etc. So have a look at this training that we're doing. Then one way is also to sign up to our partner database. So on our website is the Access Your Partner database. You can create a profile there, and you just set up your profile, and then there's like a twofold structure behind that. First of all, you can be found, so others will check out the database, because we disseminate it around Europe and around Ireland. And so people can go there and say, okay, these are organizations that are open to partner for you projects. On the other hand, you can also take your profile and send it on to potential partners. So again, I would stress to have a look at our in-depth training, and we share. I can do that. I can like do a collection of these partner databases also in the follow-up email for single programs. This is probably the best way to go. And there's another one on partners. Do the partners have to include those outside of Ireland? And I guess this means, and Emily, maybe you can help me here. It means that I think you mean, wait, Tabitha, you mean that you always need to have one from another EU member state, right? I think that is the question.
I think so. The question is, sorry, there's lots of questions.
Yeah,
Partners have to include those outside of Ireland. So yeah, so generally you have a partner in Ireland and then you have partners outside of Ireland. So kind of like the geographic scope in the EU. So you might have a partner from France or from Poland, that kind of thing. So there are projects where you can have like EU partners just within Ireland. Those are generally funded by the SERVE program, which Christina touched upon. But even if they are just only require national partners, we would still encourage you to include an EU partner, because again, that goes back to like this project provides overall added value to the EU. And sometimes those partners don't necessarily have to be paid partners. They can be what's called associated partners. So they may be part of a wider EU network, and their role in the project might be just to disseminate and promote your project results and findings. So that's a possibility as well. But in general, for the most part, yes, your project partners have to be EU member states, so outside of Ireland. Is that helpful?
Totally.
Okay.
I do hope so. I have another one. I will read that out.
Yeah.
Given the project-based nature of EU funding, do organizations run the risk of mission drift scope creep by designing projects around funding opportunities rather than around previous work and beneficiary groups? If so, do you have any tips on avoiding this?
I think like a good way to do that is to kind of examine your strategy and where EU funding fits into that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. We have an EU funding development plan, which can help organizations to really narrow down what it is that they'd like to get out of EU funding. And that can help to put some structure on it and sort of to help you to avoid that kind of mission drift and make sure that what you're doing with EU funding is in line with your values and your overall strategy as an organization. So I can go in, I'm going to be talking about that plan and how to use it in the next bit of the presentation.
Okay. Then we have one, how best can I identify projects for my organization? We work in the area of autism and neurodiversity. Should I just look at the open projects in the Access Your website? I think you mean open calls here, and that you're looking for the right open call and the right EU funding program. Terry, I think I understood it like that. So yes, have a look at the Access Your website, scroll through those calls, see where your work and your area of work would fit in. Otherwise, write us an email and then we can figure it out together. So this is a general invitation to all of you. If you don't know where does my project, my work, my area of work fit in, just write us an email and then we can have a look, because we know about the programs, we know about the open calls that are out there, and then we can see where would that fit in. You're very welcome to do so, and we can put the email in the chat in a second. I can also take the, should we do more? Yeah, right. We do have the time, Emily.
Yeah, we could do a bit more, and then I can do the steps and we can answer some more questions after that.
Okay, so the next one, where does LEARGAS fit into the EU funding landscape? So LEARGAS is a national agency for Erasmus Plus and the European Solidarity Corps. So they support you in, they give out funds, kind of, the Erasmus Plus, and they are deciding also which ideas will be funded, but they also support structure. So if you think, okay, is my project, is my organization suitable for Erasmus Plus, for ESC, then reach out to them and they will help you and support you. They have excellent events. So they are kind of giving out funds, deciding about project applications, but on the other hand, also helping you writing applications, finding partners, etc. So they are kind of the national contact point. Every program has a national contact point that does exactly this work in Ireland.
Yeah, so I guess it's important to note that the national contact point for the program, they're the experts on their program. So if you have specific technical or financial questions, they're the people to reach out to. And I guess Access Europe, our function is really to help signpost organizations to figure out where their project idea might live. So we can help you figure out where your project idea lives, help you kind of develop your project concept. We can provide feedback on your applications. And then once you get funded, we can help provide project management support. So putting those things in place. So we're really there from kind of the start to the finish. But we don't provide the funding ourselves. We're just kind of providing that general support and wraparound kind of advice and support, if that makes sense. And the contact points themselves provide the funding and can kind of give you specific advice and guidance on kind of the more financial and technical side of their programs. And that's what Largus would do with Erasmus Plus and with the European Solidarity Corps.
Okay, I would take some more.
Yeah.
Is there a limit in the number of Erasmus programs an organization can apply for in the current MFF term? I guess, Sheila, you mean how many projects you can apply for?
So waar is ons gegeven toe?
So Emily,
no, there's no limit. So you could apply for one or multiple projects every year. You just can't be kind of submitting the same project within the year. So yeah, we apply the wheel. We apply for Erasmus Plus project every year. So yeah, you can apply for more than one funding program every year as well. So yeah, there's no limit.
Then can collaboration for Erasmus Plus be between nonprofit and corporate, or can both partners be corporate limited?
Yeah, so partnerships they just have to, in order to apply for EU funding, you just have to be a legal entity. So there's something that's kind of called the quadruple helix, where the ideal partnership would be an academic body, a civil society organization, which kind of means like a nonprofit organization, a local authority, or industry. So yeah, nonprofit partnerships and corporate partnerships are out there. They exist. They are encouraged. That's fine.
Okay. Should we do a couple more questions, or would you like to do your part, Emily?
Yeah, we can move on to my bit, and then that might actually answer some of the questions. So will we do that?
Yeah,
go on to
there's so many more
steps?
questions. We will not forget about those, okay?
Okay,
I will save
yeah.
the chat and I will get back to all of you.
Perfect. All right, so we'll move on to some practical steps that you can take. So now that you have all of this information about what EU funding is, what it looks like, what some of the different programs are, how do you actually put this into action? How do you get started? $1 million question, €1 million question. Okay. Here we go. So we put together 6 steps in the hope of simplifying this. Okay, so what I mentioned earlier was a European development plan. So this is a really good first step to take. So making a European development plan, and we just so happen to have a super handy template for that we will share in the follow-up email. So completing this European development plan is a really good framework to develop your strategy for European projects, and make sure, as I said, that your strategy aligns with the strategy of the EU-funded programs that you're looking at. So completing this also provides form and structure to your organization's future in European programs. And doing it with your colleagues, we would always encourage you to involve your colleagues when you're completing this form, because it's a really good way to start an internal conversation about what you want to achieve with European funding. And the other thing is that it helps people, helps to kind of get buy-in for your involvement in EU-funded programs from your colleagues, and ensure that everybody is on board and everybody understands the opportunities that it can provide, and also, you know, what might be challenging. So it's good to involve the team while you're doing this. So the template that we're going to share in the follow-up, so for this European development plan, it includes a brainstorming activity. And that activity encourages you to list the various opportunities and the barriers relating to EU funding for your organization. So this is super helpful, because taking this approach can help you to identify where you might need more advice, where you might need more training or support before you actually undertake the application process. And it's also good to keep in mind that EU funding is not for every organization, and that's okay. It's better to kind of understand that than go down the journey and potentially have a very negative experience. So it might not be for you now, but maybe in the future. So completing the European Development Plan, it really kind of encourages you to weigh up the pros and cons and decide if it's a valuable investment of your time and effort. So really encourage you to do this with your team. So when you're completing your European Development Plan, it can be really useful to have a typical EU funding journey timeline in mind. And also remember that it is a long-term investment. So we would always advise starting small. So in the first 2 years of your plan, your aim might just be to lead small scale projects, or realistically, it might just be to be a partner on a project. So partnering on a project is a really good way
We are missing the following advices.
to learn the ropes.
Vodafone Ireland,
Sorry, Christina, could you just mute that
GRITB.
person?
Darrow Flaherty.
Thanks. So in the first 2 years of your plan, as I said, your aim might be to lead small scale projects or simply just be a partner on a project. So partnering is something that we usually advise for organizations that are new, because it's a really good way to learn how EU funded projects work without having that added financial and administrative responsibility of being a lead partner. And also you can learn from lead partners' mistakes and realize how you might do it better. So then the aim is that in 5 years' time, you'll level up. So you've now hopefully built enough capacity to scale up to larger projects or to leading projects yourself. And then in 10 years' time, the hope is that you are established in the EU funding world. So that means you're able to take on several projects at once. You can pursue higher budgets, more ambitious projects, and EU funding is a key function in your organization. So this is just sort of a timeline to keep in mind of what a typical EU funding journey looks like and what you might kind of want to reference when you're creating your own EU development plan, just to kind of keep it in perspective. Okay, so step 2, fill in the gaps. So let's say that you have completed your European Development Plan and decided, yes, EU funding is for me and my organization. So now what you need to do is fill in the gaps by doing some research on the various EU funding programs and explore the opportunity to see what's out there. So a very good place to start is our Access Europe website, which we've already mentioned. We've mentioned that it includes an EU funding guide. And the EU funding guide outlines the programs that are most relevant to Irish community and voluntary organizations. That's just what our lovely website looks like. So Christina highlighted 3 programs today. So she highlighted Erasmus+, European Solidarity Corps, and SERVE. But we would encourage you to check out the funding guide to see what other programs are out there and might be relevant to your organization's activities. So the guide includes overviews of the programs, and within those overviews, it kind of talks about the kinds of activities that the programs fund, and it also provides an example of a successful Irish project that's been funded under that specific program. And as I mentioned, we also have explainer videos on EU policy areas like the just transition and the social economy that you can reference when you are creating your own funding application. And the guide also has a directory of all the Irish national contact points for each funding program, so you can reach out to them for more of that sort of bespoke support that I mentioned earlier. So we also mentioned our Access Europe YouTube channel. So on that YouTube channel, we have recordings of all of our EU funding trainings, and we have been around for almost 4 years now, so we got a lot of trainings. We covered a lot of ground. So Christina mentioned our Introduction to EU Funding training. That is a really hefty 3-hour training, but it provides a really extensive overview of all the EU funding programs out there. Then we also have shorter kind of spotlight trainings on specific EU funding programs. And we usually do those in collaboration with the national contact points. So we have a lot of different trainings that we've done on Erasmus Plus with Lergus. We have trainings that we've done on the LIFE program, which is all about environmental funding. Trainings that we've done on things like building an EU partnership, writing your EU application, designing your project. We have a whole series on EU funding for sports organizations. So I really encourage you to check out the YouTube channel, see if there's a program that you'd like to learn more about and see if there's a training on it. Watch it, and if there isn't, then please let us know, because we're always happy to organize one. We always want to know what people want to learn about and see if there's any gaps that we need to fill in. Okay, so step 3. So once you've done your EU funding research and you have a sense of what's out there and what funding programs you're interested in, it's also time to start thinking about building your EU network. So Christina mentioned, and we've talked about this, that a core element of EU funded programs is partnering with other EU countries. And again, we have a whole in-depth training on how to do this, but just some quick tips to get you thinking about how to build your EU network and get your name out there. So we would definitely recommend attending events on EU funding like this one. It can just help you see which of your peers are involved in the EU funding space and provide opportunities for peer exchange. So as Paul mentioned, he learned that the Ballymun Job Centre was involved in EU funded projects, reached out to them and got a good tip for a potential partner to reach out to for their own project, which ended up working out. So use your network here in Ireland. So it's also a good idea to sign up to EU funding newsletters. So the Irish National Contact Points usually have newsletters for their programs where they highlight different trainings and events that they're running. And sometimes they run partner matchmaking events. So it's very worthwhile to sign up to their newsletters to stay informed about those opportunities. We also recommend doing a bit of desk research, and that can be as simple as Googling and seeing what organizations are out there in the EU doing work in your space or in an area that you're interested in. And then once you've done that research, you might like to reach out to just for an initial chat about a potential collaboration. It doesn't even have to be anything formal. The worst that can happen is an organization says, no, we're not interested, and they might signpost you to an organization that they think would be interested in. The other thing that's great to do is join European networks. There are loads of them out there. And here we've just listed a few under the themes of aging, young people, disability, environment, and civil society in general. But I'm sure you could find one for whatever topic you work in or are interested in. So joining the networks is a really good way, not only just to kind of meet EU organizations and get your name out there, but it's a good way to be invited into projects as a partner. Because a lot of the organizations that are in these networks have a lot of experience in EU-funded projects and are looking for Irish partners, since many of them would have lost their go-to English-speaking partner as a result of Brexit. So that's something to be aware of. The other thing you can do, as Christina mentioned, is create a profile on our Access Europe partner database. So this is just a screenshot of some of the organizations that have already created profiles on the database. It is just for organizations in Ireland. And what we do with the database, as Christina mentioned, is we disseminate it, we share it with our EU networks, and the hope is that organizations will invite you into partnerships. And you can also use the profile as a basis yourself to reach out to potential project partners and showcase your strengths. So maybe once you've done your research about the organizations that you're interested in talking to, you create a Access Europe partner profile, and you can link, you can reach out to the organizations you're interested in talking to and share the link to your profile, which will showcase what you want to do in terms of EU funding, your project experience, and your funding goals, and the strengths that you can bring to a project. So it's a really handy tool to have. Okay, step 4. So you are working on building your EU network. You have an idea of the types of EU funding programs that are relevant to your work. Now it's time to monitor the funding opportunities and make sure you're staying up to date. And a really easy way to do that is to sign up for our free monthly Access Europe newsletter. So every month we research all the EU funding deadlines that are relevant to civil society, and we include them in this newsletter. So we've done a lot of the hard work for you and tried to make the process of finding the right funding call a bit easier. So the newsletter also highlights relevant EU policy news, updates, and trainings and events. And we will include the registration link in the follow-up email. And then step 5 is to identify an opportunity that you would like to pursue. So you've narrowed down the funding programs that are best suited to your organization's goals, and you're monitoring those programs via the newsletters, hopefully. So now you've got to keep your eyes peeled for a specific funding call that you'd like to apply for. So once you've identified that opportunity, you can actually start making an application. And this is when it's very important to know what supports are out there to help you to make that application. Which leads me to step 6, get support. So now I'm going to let Christina talk to you about the specific supports that we offer through the Access Europe program. We've touched on a lot of them throughout the morning, but just to really hammer it home, we're going to talk about the 4 kind of key supports that we provide through Access Europe that you can avail of for free. So Christina, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. We mentioned that before, so we have key services for you. This is, for example, you will find on our website updates on new EU funding programs and deadlines. We provide, as was mentioned now, also already a lot free trainings and events. All our trainings and events are free of charge. They can be in person or online. We also offer one-to-one advice. So you just write us an email. You see here our contact details, europe@wheel.ie. We are happy to set up a call with you to meet and to learn about your organization. And maybe you already have a project idea in mind, but also maybe you have other questions. So let us know, and then we can see if we can find the right program or call for you. We also offer application support in case you will go for a certain call and write an application. So this is the things that we can do. And also we offer networking opportunities. We have, again, online events that then are new level. We were running those and are planning to run events, for example, the SURF program. So where we will invite organizations across Europe and from Ireland to meet online and then to check out are we suitable partners and would like to go for some calls. I mentioned that the SURF calls will be published in November, so very soon, and they will have a deadline in the first quarter of 2025. So in early 2025, we will run those partnership matchmaking events around the SURF calls. We also have local networking opportunities. And this is, for example, our EU Programs Manager network. This is a network that is for organizations that have already implemented EU projects or just received a grant. And this is a peer-to-peer network where the organizations can exchange about topics related to EU funding. Might it be project management, reporting, evaluation, dissemination, and so forth. So there are multiple opportunities. You're very welcome to follow us on social media. We have a new LinkedIn profile because we're moving a little bit away from X, but still we're active there for the near future. There's our email address, our website, and also where you can sign up for the newsletter. I mentioned that just in the chat. We will share all slides with all the hyperlinks that you see here, so you don't need to write that down. And that's it, if I haven't forgotten anything about our supports. Yeah, and to mention this, I shared it in the chat before. Next week actually is already our Access Europe Showcase in Croke Park in Dublin. This is a day which is focused on EU funding. We will, first of all, have a panel of success stories. So 3 organizations will share their experience with EU funding, with implementing EU projects. We will have an EU Expo. We were mentioning those national contact points before. So for example, Leagas will be there with a stand. You can go there to Gemma. Gemma was mentioned by Paul before, and ask her questions about Erasmus+. But there will also be, in total, there will be 11 programs. So there will also be there EU for Health, for example, with a health focus. There will be some Interregs, which do interregional funding. So we have in total 10, 11 national contact points there with actual people who can go there and ask questions. And also what we will do is celebrate the winners of the Our EU Story Awards. This is a small competition that we run annually, and people hand in videos about their EU projects, showing what kind of impact their projects had in their communities locally. So we will also celebrate the winners in this occasion. So if you would like to register, it's in Croke Park in Dublin in person next week. And it's free of charge, of course, as well. Okay, anything else? We have some questions left, Emily.
Okay.
Yes, we actually have one for Paul. Paul, if you would like to jump in on that, I can read it out to you once more.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Paul, could you please share more light on the funding side of things? And how did you find the application process? Was the effort worthwhile? Seems a quick turnaround if you started only a year ago.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose the funding side of things, I don't know whether ours is exceptional in that it was relatively straightforward. I mean, we identified the number of people we wanted to send. So from our point of view, our budget was very straightforward. We were booking flights for 11 people. The fee that we agreed with CIS, who were the organization we were collaborating with over in Malaga, they had a set fee based on the number of participants, the number of learners who were traveling over. So they told us what that was. And then and I can't remember, Emily, you might correct me, I think it's Lurgus actually have a per diem. Now the per diem, the daily rate for each learner to cover the likes of out-of-pocket expenses, meals, etc. And that's set. Now there's different rates depending on what country people are coming from. So that bit can be a little bit confusing when you're looking at it first off. But so we didn't actually have to come up with that. That there is a rate there specifically for learners from Ireland, and we applied that then. So from our point of view, everything really was a multiplier of 11. The cost of flights, the cost of the per diem, the cost of Angela and the team at CIS to run the program for the 11 learners going over. So we actually found it relatively straightforward, which probably sounds a bit of a contradictory to what the guys were saying earlier on. So I don't know whether we were exceptional in that regard. The one thing that I would say is in terms of the application process, and it's probably a bit like most grants that you do, is just the preparation beforehand, have the relevant documents lined up. With this, I suppose there is a requirement to get input from, we have our own legal department, so our own head of legal needed to sign off to accept the T's and C's of the contract. Equally, our finance team needed to sign off. So I suppose out of respect to your colleagues, just be prepared, maybe put it on their radar at the earliest opportunity rather than leaving it to the last minute, because whoever is signing off as the legal the legal representative, they need to provide evidence of their ID and their home address and stuff like that. That can be a little bit of a convoluted process. I know poor Olivia, our head of legal, was trying to scan her passport, and it simply wasn't working. Then we ran into difficulties that we hadn't anticipated, whereby her maiden name differed from the name that she works at in. So there was a few things there that were just totally unforeseen. So just the preparation piece is really important, that you just get the relevant documentation from anybody who needs to be a signature to signing up to the funding. But was it worthwhile? Absolutely. I mean, the feedback from the 11 learners who travelled has just been, it's far surpassed our expectations, to be quite honest with you. And I know that they're just chomping at the bit to actually apply the learnings to their daily work. So I don't think there'd be no question there in terms of whether it was worthwhile or not. We purposely, I suppose it probably touches on something that Emily and Christina mentioned earlier on. We purposely didn't want to pitch at a particularly high level in terms of the funding or our capacity to deliver on the project. So we were sort of realistic with ourselves in terms of what we could deliver, and that was reflected in the amount of money that we applied for and thankfully secured. So to us, we just wanted to sort of get the experience done, deliver a valuable project for our team and learn from it, so that maybe the next time around, next year, later, the year after, whenever it might be, we might apply for a larger sum of money for a bigger project, but we'll have the foundations there that we can build on for the next round of funding.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Paul. And thank you for reaffirming the advice that we're giving today. I saw a question there. Are there some mechanisms to allow projects in Northern Ireland to participate in EU projects? I think that probably means organizations in Northern Ireland. So there is the Peace Plus funding program, and that is managed by the special EU programs body in Belfast. So Peace Plus is for the 6 counties and border counties to collaborate on projects together under 6 different thematic themes. So those can be quite big, large-scale projects, but Hubble is actually going to be launching small-scale Peace Plus grants, and that was supposed to happen this summer, but hopefully will happen this year. So we'll be keeping an eye out on what those kind of smaller-scale Peace Plus grants look like, and we're going to be doing hopefully a webinar with Hubble about how organizations in the sector can access them. Apart from Peace Plus, generally, Northern Ireland is not eligible to participate in EU-funded projects unless they have a branch of their organization that's based in the Republic. So yeah, that's the skinny on Northern Ireland's participation in EU-funded projects.
I would have one more.
Yeah.
And this says the SURF fund looks interesting to me. However, I'm daunted by the administrative burden in managing the fund and the project if the funds do not normally fund salaries or administrative costs. How have others found this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is a challenge, and it's something that you kind of have to be willing to take on, is that it's not going to sort of fund salaries in general or business as usual. It is about funding a specific innovation. It's kind of an add-on to the funding, the core funding that you already have, I guess, is a way to think about EU-funded projects. Generally, the funding that you get, the budget that you get, it funds the travel and subsistence to take part in the kind of transnational meetings, and there will be a budget for project management fees. And sometimes through specific programs, it depends on the programs, there are working days, which can cover the staff time that is allocated to working specifically on that project. But again, the budgets and how they're allocated vary by the specific funding program. So if you do identify an opportunity that you're interested in and you have specific questions about it, we can put you in contact with the relevant national contact point. It's served, so there's not a national contact point, but if you have specific questions about the budget, please feel free to reach out to us directly and we can do a bit of research for you on that.
Okay, I would have one more question.
Yeah.
Is there any criteria that an applicant nonprofit or like a nonprofit organization should have revenue to avail the funding? If so, is there a limitation on income that a nonprofit makes? I would say no.
Ooh. Yeah, I don't really know about that, to be honest. I mean, you
Okay.
have to be kind of financially solvent and stable in order to participate in EU-funded projects, and in any kind of funding, that would be the case. I'm not sure about the limitation on the income the nonprofit makes. But again, if there's a specific program that you're looking at, just send it on to us and I can have a bit of a deep dive and try to find the answer for you. Anything else?
Just checking. Oh, I don't think that I see a new question, or I also answered some in the chat already.
Okay, so, oh yeah, they're a health-focused organization. Okay, great. I mean, thank you so much, everybody, for your engagement. I hope that this was helpful and somewhat inspiring. And that we will be hearing from some of you about starting your own EU funding journeys. Like, this is a lot of information to take in. It's hard to know where to start, but that's what Access Europe is here for. So please do feel free to reach out to us individually. Sign up for the showcase next week. You can talk to everybody, all the national contact points in person. It's a really good opportunity to also network with your peers and hear about how successful they've been in terms of EU funding, and be inspired to get started. So and also big thanks to Paul. Thank you for sharing Respond's journey with the group today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
everyone.
Enjoy the rest of your day.